Welcome all you sourdough subscribers. Yes, we've hit 5,000. Unbelievable. Thank you so much. I guess it shows there is some silver lining to this pandemic. You're all at home creating sourdough starters, so I guess you want a tutorial to show you how to use it. So today I want to show you how to make sourdough focaccia. So I've chosen sourdough focaccia because if you're new to sourdough, I think it's a great place to start. Yes, you could just go straight in and make a sourdough loaf, but at the end of the day, you're going to end up with exactly that, just a sourdough loaf. But this is going to be like a meal in itself. It's easy to make, it's absolutely delicious, and it's really versatile. You can go as simple or as crazy as you like with the toppings, anything from just herbs and salt, to cheeses, or if you think of any of the Italian antipastis like sun-dried tomatoes, grilled peppers, caramelized onions. One of my favorites is to saute some butternut squash or sweet potato, cut it in cubes, saute that in olive oil with some garlic, some chili flakes, spread that out on top, then add some goat cheese or some blue cheese, and that makes a beautiful topping. It's almost like, I guess you could think of it as a deep pan pizza, but it's focaccia. So, where do you start? Well, you're going to need 450 grams of strong white bread flour, 350 grams of water, then you're going to need 100 grams of active sourdough starter or leaven. So like I say, there's not too many techniques involved in this. There's not a lot of shaping and scoring and all that, but what you do need is an active starter to make sure this puffs up and gives you that nice, light, chewy crumb inside. So 100 grams of active starter, and then just 7 grams of salt, and then of course you're going to need olive oil. 20 grams that's going to get incorporated into the dough, and then as you'll see we'll be using a little bit more in the pan when we come to shaping and before we bake it. So I'm going to be using the KitchenAid because this is quite a wet dough. We're at 80% hydration, but of course you could mix it by hand, but like I say, where it is wet, it's not going to be a case of tipping it out and kneading it on a work surface. It's going to be more a case of mixing it in the bowl using the rhubarb method, which means reaching in and stretching the dough, going around with this motion for about 5 minutes will be ample. But with the KitchenAid, it's very easy. So into our bowl, we've got the flour, the water, and then your sourdough starter. Smelling good. 107, that's absolutely fine. And now I'll hold back the salt at this stage. It's something I've kind of been doing with all my sourdoughs at the moment. I like to get everything mixed and leave it for 2 hours before I incorporate the salt, just to give the yeast time to start feeding on all that new flour. It's a bit like you're kind of feeding your starter, it's just a big feed. So we're going to give that a mix. Start it off on a low speed so it's not all tipping out the bowl everywhere, but once it's incorporated you can turn that up to a 2 or a 3 and leave it to mix for about 5 minutes. Okay, that's mixed, everything's nicely incorporated. So now what I do, leave it in the bowl and just cover the top. I used to use a tea towel, now I prefer to use a plastic bag. Wrap that around, and that's just going to stop the dough drying out at all or forming a crust on top. And like I say, leave that for 2 hours and then we'll come back to add the salt and do the second mix. Okay, so that's been resting there for 2 hours and not much would have happened. You might see it start to puff up a little bit. So it looks like that. You can see it has just domed on the edges a little bit. We're starting to get a teeny bit of growth. So now is the time where you want to add your salt and then do another and another 2 to 3 minutes of mixing. We don't really need to develop the dough anymore. It's more about just making sure the salt is fully incorporated. And I forgot to add the olive oil in the first round, so we can add that now. It doesn't really matter whether you add it in with the first batch of ingredients or now. So sprinkle the 7 grams of salt in like that, and then you want to add 20 grams of olive oil. And use a nice olive oil. This is an extra virgin because you are going to taste it. That's sort of the point of this. There we go. So, like I say, back on the mixer, 2 to 3 minutes, and that'll be all the mixing done. Okay, there we go. So that is everything incorporated, and now, because we already had the leaven in there from the beginning, I would count bulk proof starting from that time. So basically it's already had 2 hours of bulk proofing, so now we want to give it another 4, and that'll give us 6 in total. And we're going to do a set of coil folds kind of every half hour, 45 minutes. You don't need to worry about it too much, but we're just going to be building a bit of strength up in the dough. Not so much that we're going to get a really tall, proud loaf at the end, because remember, a focaccia is actually a flatbread, but we want to develop that sort of stretchy dough to get those nice open pockets inside. So scrape any excess dough off the dough hook, like that. And now you could leave it in there and do your coil folds in there, but it's a little bit tricky, so you might prefer to tip it out into a flat dish like this. And that's just going to make life a lot easier when you come to folding it, and it's easier to gauge how much your dough has grown. So I would suggest just putting a little olive oil in the bottom just to help it release when you come to do your set of stretch and folds. Like so. Cover it with a bit of cling film.
Sorry, I don't know that.
I wasn't asking you, Alexa. Cover it with a little bit of cling film, and like I say, we're going to leave it for 4 hours, doing stretch and folds every half hour for about the first 2 hours. So we'll do 4 sets of stretch and folds. So I'll join you back in half an hour, show you that, and then we'll skip right through to the end of the bulk. Okay then, so that's been about half an hour since we tipped it out into this bowl. So if I take the cling film off, you want to keep it flat because you're going to put that back on. And now we can do our first set of coil folds. So normally I'd wet my hands to stop the dough from sticking, but as this is a focaccia, we can use a little bit of olive oil. So if you just put a little bit on top of the dough, not too much, and then rub it basically a little bit onto the dough, but basically onto your hands. You might still get a little bit sticking, but it'll help. Then you want to reach in at the sides and just ease it away from the side of the bowl, and then pull it up from the middle, and you want to try and get it so that top part of the dough releases from the bowl. So fold it back down onto the top of the dough, and then go in again and pull and put it down on top of that bit of dough. And then the last time, and this time it should release, so we'll go in, up, there we go. Now we can see that front bit's released. So now put that back in the bowl and let the dough fold over it. Turn the bowl around and do the same on the other side. So lifting from the middle, stretching the dough, and then resting it onto itself. Reaching again, stretch, and now it's released. And now turn the bowl 90 degrees, and we're going to do the same, and this should bring it into quite a nice square shape. So again, reach down the sides, lift, it'll probably just release on the first go, there we go. Turn it again, and this time it'll probably come right out the bowl, there we go. So lay that flat in the bowl, and then you can sort of turn the dough onto it. There we go. and it's in a sort of a rectangle. At this early stage the dough is still quite sticky, but as you go into the bulk proof you'll find these become easier, the dough pulls away and you should end up with a pretty neat rectangle. So what I'm going to do, I will continue doing these over the next sort of 2 to 3 hours, and then we're going to leave it for that final 1 to 2 hours just to bulk proof, and I'll show you what it looks like at the end of that bulk proof before we transfer it to the fridge. Bonus fold. I know I said I was going to leave it to the end of bulk proof, but actually I thought I'd film the second set of coil folds from above so it might be a little bit easier to follow what I'm doing, and you'll also get to see how much easier the dough becomes to work with the further we go into bulk. So I'm just going to remove the cling film again, and then we'll put a little olive oil just to stop it sticking to my hands. Get a bit of that olive oil onto my fingers. As you can see, look, it's not sticking anymore. So we want to reach in at the sides, lift the dough up, and then fold it onto itself, reach in again, lift, fold onto itself, lift third time, you should find it all releases, there we go. Then turn the bowl, reach in, lift, and put it onto itself, in, pull onto itself, and again this time it should fully release, there we go. And then turn it 90 degrees, and in at the sides, lift the top, let that fold under and down, turn it the other way, lift, and then it's fully released, so put that in, put it on top like so. And once again we've completed another set of coil folds, and you can see this time it's in a much neater rectangle. There's a few bits stuck on the side of the bowl, but as it expands they will get caught up in the dough, and the next couple of times you'll find the bowl is nice and clean. So cover that back up. You've got 2 more sets to do now over the next hour and a half, and then you can just leave it alone until you reach the end of the bulk proof, which would be about 6 hours. If your room's very warm it could happen a bit quicker, if it's cold it'll take a little bit longer, but basically you're looking for the dough to have kind of doubled in size, and it should be nice, light, airy, you can see some bubbles on it, some pockets of air, then you'll be good to go. Okay, then we've reached the end of the 6 hours and my dough's looking pretty good. It's puffed up nicely. I'm just going to take the cling film off so you can see it. Turn it that way. So as you can see, it's got a few big air bubbles on top. It's quite jiggly and wiggly. These are all good signs that there's lots of gas trapped in there and the dough is now really light and airy. So I'm going to cover that back up and now put it in the fridge overnight to cold proof, and I will show you what to do with it in the morning. Okay, so our dough is cold proof overnight. That is cold from the fridge, looking nice and puffy. You can hear it's full of air. That is ready to go. So you're going to need a baking tray like that, or I like to use a roasting tin with a bit of an edge to it just to help support the sides of the dough so we get a nice even focaccia that doesn't taper off at the end. And I've lined it with a bit of greaseproof paper to stop it sticking. So what you want to do is just put a little olive oil into the bottom of there. That's just going to help it not stick and also adds more flavour to the dough. So now you want to get this out. So let's peel the cling film off. And now rather than wetting your hands, if you just get a little bit of that olive oil on your fingers, it should stop the dough sticking to you. And then you want to reach in and just being really careful not to tear the dough or degas it too much. That is lovely and plump and full of air, and we want to keep that as we get it into the tin. So I'm just going to reach down, like I'm going to do a coil fold, lift it up, it should all release, and then fold, let it just sit in there, fold in on itself. So it almost is an extra coil fold. I'll move that out of the way. And now again, a little extra olive oil on top. This is all about it not sticking to you. So being very gentle, just smear that olive oil over, get it on your fingers, and now you can start to just work that dough out and stretch it to fill up the tin. So push your fingers in and just coax it towards the edges, just being careful you don't push out all those lovely bubbles. Now, it's going to resist you a bit because we've done that extra set of coil folds, so we've added some tension. So what I like to do is stretch it till you can feel it's pulling back in again, and now leave it for about 10 to 15 minutes just to relax. It's also going to warm up a little bit, and then we'll be able to do a second stretching to get it right to the edges without damaging the dough too much. Okay, so our dough has relaxed for another 15 minutes at room temperature, so we should now find we can stretch it all the way to the edges without tearing it. Then we can get our toppings on and bake it. So actually I've just preheated my oven to 200 degrees Celsius. That's 395 for our American friends. So I'm just, in fact, before I get all olive oily, I'm just going to slice my cherry tomatoes. So I'm going to be topping mine with some cherry tomatoes, a little dried oregano, the extra olive oil, and then a little bit of flaky sea salt. This is actually smoked sea salt, but any flaky sea salt will be good. So I've got like a dozen cherry tomatoes here. I'm just going to slice them all in half. Get them out of the way. Okay, so a little extra olive oil again, and this is all going to get absorbed into the dough. It's going to be delicious, but at this stage it's also going to help us not get too sticky, so work it onto the fingers, and then again, here we go, just stretching out, and this time you want to create those dimples. So in, pull it to the side, in, pull it to the side, in, pull it to the side, and now we can see the dough is pretty much filling up the whole thing. It's not contracting again, it's filling up the whole tray. So now we can get the toppings on, get that oil off my hands, because what I like to do is get the oregano on first, so that when I push the tomatoes in, they take some of the oregano down with it, and you get little pockets with the tomato juice and oregano in there. Bit of a pizza vibe going on. So just a very light sprinkling of the dried oregano, but you can use fresh herbs, whatever you like. And then just dot your tomatoes around. I'm just going to put them on like this for now. And I put them all seed side up, cut side up. So then as they're cooking in the oven, they're going to dehydrate a little bit. The juices in the tomato can just start to evaporate. And now really push those tomatoes down into the dough, right the way down to the bottom. So now it's looking like that. And a final drizzle of olive oil. And then our sprinkling of sea salt. And you want to put the sea salt on just before you bake it. If you put it on too early and then leave it sitting around for another 15 minutes, the salt's going to dissolve, and again you're going to end up with that very salty bread rather than having the little crisp shards on top. So just like half a teaspoon. You don't want to make this too salty. There we go. Get them over. And now into the oven. So there we have it, the final focaccia, looking nice. I left it in the oven for an extra couple of minutes just to get a little bit of colour. No, you don't want a thick, crunchy crust, but on the other hand, you don't want a kind of pale and anemic focaccia. So just keep an eye on it and wait till it's browned up. So now I've left this for about 10 minutes just to cool off a little bit, and it also gives the, the bread now the opportunity just to absorb any of the excess olive oil that's kind of pooled around the edges. You don't want to waste any of that. So now we can slide it out of the pan and take it off the paper. Ooh. So let's cut into this, see what it's like inside, and give it a little taste up. So I'm going to cut right through those tomatoes. That'll give me something nice to taste there. Cut into it, let's have a look. Looking good. We've got a nice kind of spongy interior, some big air pockets, and then you can see we've got these pools where the tomatoes are. The tomato juice is collecting at the bottom, mixed with the oregano. That should have a nice pizza vibe to it. So let's cut a little section off. Oh yeah, look at that, nice and squidgy, baked all the way through. This should be pretty delicious, I will let you know. That really is lovely. The tomatoes are so intense. You've got the oregano, really got that sourdough tang from the cold overnight proof. You can taste the olive oil, and then you've got those little shards of salt on top. It's an absolute delight. You could add a salad to it if you want to sort of dress it up a bit. Certainly add a glass of wine, but then go and sit in the garden in the sun, have a lazy alfresco lunch. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say that's the end of the video. If you've enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. As always, leave your comments and questions below. I always try and get back to you. But that's it. So give this one a go. And until next time, stay safe and happy sourdough baking.